All right, welcome back to Statistical Methods and Analysis. We're on Chapter 3. We're dealing with understanding the variability of a data set and what does that really mean. Hopefully you've read Chapter 3 and we're going to get to the PowerPoint real quick. Variability is valued as a descriptive tool. It tells us how spread out things are, how close to the center things are. Differences between variance and standard deviation. And we're going to learn how to compute the range, standard deviation, and variance. All right, variability, why is it important? It's how different scores are from one particular score. It's our spread, it's our distribution of it. The score we're really looking at here is the mean. We want to know how these are different from the mean. So our variability is really the measure of how each score in a group differs from the mean of that data set. So last chapter we learned how to calculate these means. Now how do each of these scores differ from it? So if you're looking at your Excel assignment in Chapter 2 and Chapter 3, it's going to ask you to compare. So you're going to have to use a little bit of this variability from Chapter 3 to finish your Excel assignment for Chapter 2. So here we go. 3 types. We got the range, standard deviation, and variance. Okay, all 3 of them are different in their own way. They all kind of describe things a little bit differently. Typically report the average and the variability together. It's a score of 75 a mean of 75 doesn't really tell us a lot unless we know how spread out things are. So you want to always kind of, when you're reporting, you want your min, you want your max, you want your range, you want your median, you want your mean, and you want your standard deviation and variance. All right, so we're going to start with our range. 2 types, exclusive and inclusive. They're not much different. Exclusive, you just need to take your range is the high minus the low. Your max score minus your min score. Your inclusive range is your high or your max minus your low or your min plus 1. What the plus 1 is doing is it just getting rid of a little bit of the bias that we have here. Everything we do in statistics, we want unbiased. We want things to be reported and calculated in an unbiased manner so that when we do our actual research, somebody can't say, you tainted these numbers. So that's what we're kind of doing here. We're going to start here with finding standard deviation next. Here's our formula for standard deviation. It's standard deviation is equal to the square root of your sum of x minus x bar, and we're going to square that. All divided by the number minus 1. Big equation, a lot of things going on there. All you need to know is what you get out. Go into Excel, type it in standard deviation. Go to your descriptive statistics, get your standard deviation out. It's going to tell you how spread out things are. All right, standard deviation, average the amount of variability in a set. Okay, standard deviation is intended to be an estimate of the population. You got a sample, we want an estimate of our population here. We want to be unbiased. So how we get that unbiased, on the bottom of that equation, we got the n minus 1, we subtract 1 from it. What it does, that makes our standard deviation just a little bit bigger. So in other words, if you're thinking about this, we want to be a little more conservative in our estimation of the entire population. Your class isn't going to represent the entire population, it's a sample. So we have to use that unbiased method to make these calculations. Alright, so standard deviation is computed. Okay, it's computed as the average distance from the mean. We want to know how far from the mean each of these things are. You're going to see once we get later on some things that are 1 standard deviation away, 2 standard deviations away, 3 standard deviations away, and how these all fit into normal curves. The larger the standard deviation, the greater the variability. You got a standard deviation of 3, you got quite a bit of variability in between. And we'll get into all that, how we get that. What we want to do now is we want to calculate it, figure out how much variability is in our sample set. Like the mean, standard deviation is sensitive to extreme scores. That's very important here. We got outliers, your standard deviation is going to be very sensitive to it. If S is 0, then there's no variability. That means you got the same number all the way through. So you got a mode of, let's say your data set is 50, 50, 50, and 50. Your mode's 50. Your median's 50. Your mean's 50. you got no variance. It's the exact same number, the whole data set. That's what that's getting at. All right, now we're going to compute the variance. The variance and standard deviation are a lot alike. Variance is just your standard deviation squared. So that square root that's around everything, we take that out. It's no longer there. You know, there's a lot of things that are very similar, but how we report them is different. Our standard deviation, we do normal units. Our variance is units squared, which when you report things, that's a big factor. Okay, so right here, kind of what I got to the last slide. They're quite similar, but they're different. Standard deviation, original units, variance, units squared. Which do you think is easier to interpret? I'll be honest, standard deviation's a lot easier to interpret. We know how far things are from the mean. All right. Right here is just an example of something you could get out of Excel. If you use the data analysis toolpath, it's going to be a little bit different, a little easier to read. Gives you your standard deviation right here, 0.70255. Variance, we're taking this, we're squaring, we get 0.494, and our range is 2.6. It gives us everything we need. Up here in is 30. That means we have 30 participants in this survey. All right, here's some glossary terms you need to know. You need to know your range. You need to know your standard deviation, how to get an unbiased estimate, how to get a mean deviation, and then you need to know your variance. Those are all important things. This kind of wraps up chapter 3. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me. My online office hours are posted. Also, I got email. Get a hold of me whenever you need. Make sure you've read this section. Get the homework done. We'll see you guys next week for more videos in chapter 2. Thank you.